Hi guys, Colesy, and today we're going to be looking at some benchmarks of the giveaway PC. So if you haven't already entered or you didn't see the video, me and a few of my stream team friends are giving away a PC. If you want to enter, go check out that video. In that video, I announced the PC, showed it off a little bit and built it. But this episode, I have been running some benchmarks on it. Just running some games and, gathering the FPS data on those games to see how good this PC is, what it can run, and how it performs. And I've got to say, I'm genuinely pleasantly surprised. Now, I know that this PC is made of secondhand parts. What I saw on Twitter, someone called a Frankenstein PC, which I think is, fairly appropriate, I guess. It is kind of cobbled together a little bit. It actually performs really well considering the age of some of these parts. Like the graphics card specifically is an older graphics card. It's a GTX 670, but even so, it still runs fine. It plays the games that I ran pretty well. Obviously, we're going to go through the benchmarks and look at the FPSs and all that good stuff. I tried to sort of pick a variety of what people might be interested in playing and also what I have available to test. So there is CSGO, there is Rocket League, Rust, PUBG, Fortnite, and Cyberpunk. I played these games on the PC for like a good, 15-20 minutes each. Everything ran well, had no issues with the PC. Actually, I tell a lie. There was one slight issue with the PC, which I have now rectified. I was sat here testing games, and then the rear exhaust fan, I can see it. It's sat on my desk, so I can see the PC out the corner of my eye while I'm doing whatever I'm doing and setting up. And then suddenly I see the fan sort of just stop spinning. It just stopped spinning. The lights were still on, but it stopped spinning. I'm like, well, that's not normal. And I was monitoring temperatures and all that good stuff just to make sure that everything runs fine and didn't get, too hot and shut itself down or whatever. But the fan never turned back on. I restarted it never turned back on. So I have replaced the rear fan. It's no longer blue. It's now a purple Corsair fan, which works fine. But that was the only thing that I've had to change and sort about the PC. Everything else runs perfectly fine. Temperatures are okay. The GPU does run a little bit hot, but then I guess that is the style of GPU it is. It's a blower GPU. It's a blower style fan. It's got one fan in it. And also it's an older GPU. I remember my GTX 480 that I had was my first graphics card. That ran particularly hot, so maybe it's just a thing with these older cards. They do tend to run a little bit hot, but saying that, never had any issues with it. It never conked out or anything like that, so that's all good. But yeah, let's get into some benchmarks, I think. If you see any sort of artifacting during this, I noticed while editing this that there's some sort of weird squares, artifact stuff. That's not the games themselves. That must be the way I recorded it through the capture card, and it hasn't really recorded it to the highest of quality. So you might see some of those weird little artifacting, but that wasn't the game. The game's ran completely clean and fine, so don't worry about that.
One guy left. Counter-terrorists win. It's them. Heading over. Too late, run! I'm defusing the bomb. Terrorists win.
Okie dokie, well that's that. That's the benchmarks done for the few games that I was able to test. Obviously, there's a lot more games out there. Unfortunately, if you were looking for a specific game tested that I didn't do, I just didn't have time. I can't test everything. All the games that I played are playable. Even Cyberpunk, once you dial it down to 720p instead of 1080p, it is playable, just about. And that's Cyberpunk. That's a game that very recently came out and is known for not being very good for anyone, really. No matter what your PC is running, it's not been a great performing game. But for the rest of them, they were all really playable. I actually sat and played each of these games for, 20 minutes, maybe half an hour for some of them. And I never thought any of them were unplayable. I was expecting some of these to not be playable and not run, especially like Cyberpunk, but they all ran reasonably well. Fortnite, high, average FPS 55, and then if you dial that down to medium, you're getting a lot more FPS. I was expecting for some of these games to really have to dial back the graphics and for them to look pretty terrible, but actually I don't think any of them looked bad. Even Cyberpunk, once you dialed it down to 720, initially it was a little bit weird because I'm like, oh, this isn't as good quality as I'm used to, but then like within 5 minutes, I was kind of fine with it and used to it, and I was just enjoying playing the game. Fortnite, both medium and high, pretty good. It set me on high from the start, which is why I started with high. And Rocket League set me automatically to high, so I played with that. Average FPS with that was 164, so that's perfectly fine, completely playable. Again, same with CSGO pretty much. It automatically set me to high. CSGO, it's a fairly old game. It's an esports title. It ran perfectly fine. You're running at 157 frames average on high, so even if you wanted to do some sort of high refresh rate with this PC, you could do, although I would probably recommend upgrading it before you start looking at high refresh rate, but that's personal opinion. Now, I didn't really expect it to play PUBG, to be honest, but PUBG very low, again, automatically set me to that. It also set me to 70% render scale, so that was just the settings that I ran it at. Average FPS 127, again, completely playable. That was perfectly fine, not a problem there. I then did decide to try it with 100% render scale, and still we were getting above 60, so even with 100% render scale on very low, that was playable. Then Rust, popular game at the minute. Graphics quality 0. I don't know how Rust kind of works. It has like numbers rather than like low, medium, high, but it set me to graphics quality 0, so I left it as that. And the average frames was 54 FPS. The 1% lows, 0.1% lows weren't that bad either. So again, not quite 60, but definitely more than 30 and completely playable. And then, yeah, like I said, Cyberpunk at 1080p on low, which is what it set me to automatically. Yeah, 24 frames is not that great. It's a very cinematic experience, but it wasn't that great. And the 1% lows, 0.1% lows were kind of low, and you could feel it. You could feel it wasn't great. I'm sure there are people out there playing games at this frame rate. I remember Jake, when he used to play on his laptop, he would play games at this frame rate, probably less than this frame rate, and he'd just play them and have fun. But if you dial it down to 720, it's not too bad, and then you're sort of averaging above 30, so at least it's sort of playable at that point. Anyway, those are the benchmarks. Hope that has given you some more information. If you haven't already entered to win this PC, then please go and enter. Go and check out the other video if you want to see me build it. But yeah, go and enter. Myself and a bunch of the stream team have put in a bit of effort to make this machine possible and for us to be able to give this away to you guys, so I would really appreciate it if you guys want to go enter. Also, if you enjoyed this kind of video, then please remember to like, comment and subscribe, and I can look at doing more benchmarks. It is a little bit time consuming, but I think it's actually fairly informative and quite worth it. And in this case, like, I'm pleasantly surprised with how well this performs considering the age of some of its parts. So definitely worth a punt if you want to win it, I think. Anyway, thank you guys. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe if you did enjoy it, and I will see you guys next time.